Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're new to the Women Rocking Business Sisterhood, welcome. I'm here with my incredible, beloved mentor and friend and colleague, Reverend Deborah Johnson. This training is all about diversity and leadership and being a leader and an entrepreneur during these sort of trying times. You know, the question that so many of us have been asking is, how do we lead in a way that honors diversity and that honors all of humankind and that honors inclusivity in, painful, trying times? I know many of us know we're privileged in a lot of ways, and we want to honor what's happening on the planet. For those of you that are not familiar with Reverend Deborah Johnson, she has served as an instructor of higher learning. She's a consultant, an organizer, an author, a teacher, a facilitator, a lifelong social justice advocate. She's been brought in to do high-level diversity trainings with ABC, UCLA, AT&T, Apple, Kodak. She's been on ABC. She's been on NPR. She's been on the Shift Network. She's, just one of the women I look to when this stuff goes down. And you're on the board of directors for Agape, if you guys are familiar with Reverend Michael Beckwith. But Reverend Deborah, I would love for us to just start with, from your perspective, for those of us that have communities, we're growing a business in the middle of all of this, and we have people coming to us. I know I had a flood of texts and emails over the weekend from my clients saying, how do I manage this conversation when I feel inequipped? Where do we begin? And by the way, we don't have enough time to really cover this topic. So I want you to know about Reverend Deborah so you can follow her, so you can get support from the real expert. But we just wanted to dive in and kind of, scrape the surface today.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to meet and speak with people. The first thing to do is take a breath. Taking a breath, it will always help to reground you, recenter you. When it feels like we're flying off, that's our way of always coming back to point. These are big questions and these are big times. I'm not purporting to have the answers. I learned a little bit about how life works. And I'm saying that very specifically because if we stop looking at life as a series of these different small events that we have to manage, these big unknowns, and we don't know what's going to happen. But if we look at life more like something that's very orderly, that even disruption happens in an orderly fashion, that there's a way in which nature rejuvenates herself. There's a way in which nature restores herself. And if we keep looking to nature to see how things work, then we can live our lives by a larger system's divine design. So I wanted to just let that sink in with people. One of the first things we have to do is not judge by the appearances, okay? Because when it looks like things are falling apart, they're actually falling together. Whenever there's volatility happens when different energetic fields are coalescing and coming up against each other. This is true whether you're in a chemistry lab, whether you're in the congressional halls, whether it's the confines of your own home. But just remember that the volatility is the evidence that something's birthing. Something's birthing. The disruption is not for the point of destruction. The disruption is for the point of cracking something open, something bigger, something more evolutionary can take place.
It is so true.
Everybody just breathe that in for a moment.
There's actually a definition in evolutionary biology that says the role of chaos is to signify to the organism that incremental change is no longer sufficient to create transformation. And so thank you for that reminder, right?
Yes.
There's something bigger happening here.
Yes. And growth doesn't happen in just an even, equally divided, incremental ways. Anybody that's have a child, raised a child, they have growth spurts. There'll be certain summers that boom, it's like, whoa, they're inch, like right then. What happened? What happened? Bruce Lipton has a book out called Spontaneous Evolution, and saying it's the same way with human consciousness, that we have these growth spurts. And we are in one of those now. We're in a collective growth spurt. And just as a kid's growing, your knees hurt, you're a little lanky, you don't have your stride. Well, it's that same way. We are in this huge growth spurt. So one of the first things about leading and managing is don't take it personally. Don't act like it's the sign of a bad leader that you don't have it all together, or that you can't map it out and predict everything for everybody, or that it's your role to calm everybody's anxiety. Not your job. So when we're just being with what is, you ask yourself, what's trying to birth? What's trying to come through? Too often we pay far more attention to the disruption, or we pay far more attention to the catalyst that's making it happen, and even confusing the catalyst with being causation, like that's the reason why. No, that just helped it crack open, and pay more attention to what's coming through. The analogy that comes to my mind is labor and birthing.
Yeah.
If you look at birthing, oh, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. And
Baby's gotta come out of
that's
this
hard work. As I say, this big thing is coming through this little bitty crevice. That's one of the few things about divine design I really would like to ask. If there's ever a moment to have that conversation, what were you thinking in terms of live birth? But be that as it may, that's what's happening, is this big, enormous, transformative us is trying to come through this little bitty space called our personalities, called our institutions, called our societies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this way that we have to stretch, and you can't go back. The baby's crowning. This is when you gotta push. It's like push. You're exhausted, you're tired. We just have to keep pushing.
Yeah.
And this leading through times like this, I tell you, it's this cross between, in that birthing process, being the birther and being the midwife.
Uh-huh.
Okay. We're also midwifing
Right.
this. And there's empathy and compassion that we can feel for the pain that we see suffering, or the pain that we see happening. But if we remember that something's being birthed, we can even rejoice in that.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
And
this is an exciting moment.
What I hear you saying too is that we have to have compassion for ourselves.
Yes.
That is a key part of this, because something new is being birthed through us as leaders, as business owners, and compassion for those who we are leading, or those who we are leading with, our teams, our clients. I mean, yes. Lyria Charles wrote in a really beautiful post. She says, it's been a trying few days across America. Yes. In times like these, we often look to big government to provide leadership. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes, the most impactful leadership starts in our communities. Yes. In more grassroots ways. Mm-hmm. I just want to speak into and invite you to speak to, Rev D. Big government isn't going to get us through this, right?
No, big government isn't going to get us through this. And what I could say about this moment right now, the big step that I think we're all missing in terms of that taking care of ourselves is giving ourselves a chance to grieve. Okay? Anger is a stage of grief, and we are mistaking too much of the public rage out there as just anger. It's grief.
Right.
And here's the thing about grief, that it actually took me working with men in prison for 20 years to figure out that we grieve not only what we had, but we grieve more what we didn't have. That's the bigger grief. Long after relationships are over, long after you don't even want to be in the marriage, the grief isn't about the marriage you lost. It's the dream of the one that you thought you were going to have that you didn't have. It's one thing to grieve the father that died. It's another to grieve the father you never met. So what's happening with a lot of the rage that we're seeing out there is what people are grieving is not just the people dying in the streets. It's the justice they haven't had a chance to taste yet. It's the equality that keeps slipping and eluding. It's the promise of America and these promises that they haven't experienced yet. So it's just like with one-on-one life. You can't just like pick up and start the new relationship. You can't just pick up. And I would like for people to come together and grieve. And in that grief, don't just talk about all the bad stuff. Don't just talk about the cops killing people and when is the racism going to end and all of that. Just as you do at a memorial where you talk about the good stuff that you remember, rekindle the dreams. Come together and have the dream sessions. Come together as community and talk about the world that you want to see. Recommit, hold each other up, support each other. Part of the reason why it feels so daunting is that we're all trying to do it alone and siloed. But if we come together as community,
Yes,
and grieve, feel the pain of what's happening, and recommit to the possibilities of what we want it to be.
yes,
And
yes.
just like that's what gets you through when something dies, that's what gets you through when we all come together in community. That's what we need to do.
Yes. Many women in our community use processes for connecting, such as a spring cleaning process. We borrowed it from our colleague and friend, Mama Gina, where we just get together and do a repeating question around what hurts inside of ourselves.
Yes.
There's women right here in this community who are eager to do that with you. Hop on a Zoom call just like this. Don't go through this alone. You know, I have a community of over 100,000 women entrepreneurs. And when we were all about to celebrate our first female president years ago, about to step into the White House, and it didn't go that way. And I remember thinking to myself, I am completely inequipped to handle this conversation with my community. And so, you know what? I didn't do it alone. I called in backup. I called in colleagues. I called in friends that could just hold space for what people wanted to say. And I think that's the opportunity here that Reverend, you're already speaking into so beautifully, is that we don't have to know how to lead. You know, that was the question that came in all weekend long in my text thread and email inbox was, how do I lead? And the answer is, we don't have to know how to lead. It's more about being willing to saddle up next to people and be a part of the conversation, right?
Yes. It's just like parenting. Parenting is a leader, but you can't map out how to do that. You know, part of parenting is learning how to be the leader that child needs.
Right.
And that may not help you with the next child, because the next child may be completely different. So in terms of this permission and give yourself compassion, the other thing about the leadership is step into your authenticity. Step into your authenticity. It's less important about how you want to lead as it is, what do you genuinely have to offer? What is your gift to the world? And I'm not talking about, you know, just your profession or what you get paid to do. Are you a nurturer? Do you inspire people? Are you a gardener? Are you a storyteller? Are you a dancer? Are you just, do you make people laugh? What do you nurture people? Do you cook? Like whatever that is that you have to commit yourself in community. If you show up ready to give that, I promise you the doors will be open for you. We may not all be doing the exact same thing, but it'll be open for you.
I could not agree more. Those words are so well spoken. Several of the women wrote in and asked some version of, how do I make sure, Deanna wrote in and said, I want to make sure my offerings are inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that what I'm offering to the world is a match for what the world needs. And Bridget wrote in very articulately and asked, how do I continue to move forward, selling things, building my business in the face of all this? And I think what you're speaking to is the answer to many of these questions, dozens more that have come in around when you do the one right next thing.
Yes.
That you're being called to,
Mm-hmm.
that calling is actually a response to something wanting to happen through you, something much bigger than you.
Yes. And inclusion doesn't have to mean, how do you get more people into your business?
Right.
How can you give your gift to more people? Sometimes the act of empowerment may not be you bringing people into your business, but you helping somebody else with their business. It could be you helping to share your platform. It's like, who knows what that looks like, but you do want to be more inclusive, because that's where the wholeness comes from. See, we live in an integrated, interconnected universe. So think of inclusion as connection and interconnectivity. And just like with the plant and the animal kingdom, the plants are all talking to each other. They have root systems and whatnot that literally, if one tree gets sick, the nutrients to help heal it may come from another tree. We don't live on our own. And I promise you, if you have the intent to give your gifts, if you have your intent to make a difference, you will have that opportunity to make a difference.
Yes. And Reverend Deborah, you've been a mentor over the years for me, of just reminding me it is about showing up.
Yes.
You don't even have, it's about showing up. You don't even have to know the right thing to say. I've had times in my leadership where people are looking to me and I'm like, I just want to be here with you guys. I'm actually not sure what the right thing to say is right now. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I even just speak to, I'm feeling incredibly nervous right now, but I want every single one of you to know I'm here with you in this, right? It's like, yes, the authentic truth is what speaks. I mean, I got invited to speak a few years ago at a huge educational conference in Liberia, Africa. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, what in the heck do they want me in Liberia, Africa for, to talk about leadership? I'm like a white girl from California, like they're gonna think I'm ridiculous. And I remember talking to the facilitator, and the facilitator of the event said, what matters is that you get on a plane and that you come and dance with them, be with them. Yes, you'll have a microphone in your hand for part of it, but it doesn't really even matter what you say. And I just remember tears streaming, yes, from my eyes, realizing leadership is primarily about being.
Exactly. That's it. That's exactly what I'm saying about your authentic self. Like, bring you. What your kids want is you. They don't want just your money. They don't just want you leading them. They want you. And to just be there with them. That's part of the sharing in the grief. You don't have to know how to fix it. Sometimes silence is just a wonderful thing. Just show up, be part of it. Be willing to say, hey, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand. And everybody's grappling. I'm on the board of directors of the Pachamama Alliance. And we're having discussions all the time about, race relations and what do we do and how to become a more inclusive organization. I'm on the Leadership Council of the Association of Global New Thought. It isn't actually Agape. Agape is in the Association of Global New Thought. It's the umbrella, for all of us. Corporations, everybody's grappling with this. But just remember your intent. See, the intent is for wholeness. The intent is for empowerment. The intent is to have more of us coming together, playing, dancing, singing, and unleashing more power and creativity. That's what it ultimately is about. And when we see the volatility, that's just saying there's something that's been suppressing that. There's something that's been suppressing that. It'll even happen in your own life. When we are playing too small, there's a volatility in our own life.
Right.
That disrupts our own life.
Right. This was a major epiphany to me a few years ago when you and I sat down and talked about this. I realized that some of my own inner frustration and angst was that I wasn't actually going fast enough to keep up with who I was becoming. Mm-hmm. And we all think, oh, I'm pushing myself too hard, but there's also an aspect of letting go and doing that one right next thing, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to be 3 steps to yourself, and you don't have to be 3 steps behind.
No, but you know what? It's interesting you should say that, because I find that on the spiritual journey, most of us move like an inchworm.
Totally.
And what happens with the inchworm is that it makes this leap. Okay. So the first part of its body makes this big quantum leap. And its rear is back here. So the head's over here and its rear is back. And most of the body isn't even touching anything. It's just up in the air. And something within us makes this quantum leap, and our ass is back there. And so you make this quantum leap in consciousness, but your whole life and it's structured is back here. And it's gotta like slowly catch up with you. But then by the time that happens, whoop, you make another leap. And it does feel like we're in these like 2 worlds at the same time.
And why do we sometimes go kicking and screaming? I mean, I remember your sermon one day here in the Bay Area. Reverend Deborah has a huge congregation following in the Bay Area, and I've sat in her pew many times just studying her every word. And one of the things you said one time is you're like, I went kicking and screaming. You're like, I wasn't planning on heading up this ministry. I was going to be live streaming from the Bahamas.
Yeah.
It's like, how have you've become such a surrendered leader? Share just a little bit about that journey.
Kicking, I love Melissa Felipe's song, Kicking and Screaming Down the Path of Transformation. It's kind of what I was saying in the beginning. I understand more now how nature works, and I don't take it so personally. It's just the nature of change. That ego self of us, that little space that everything's got to come through, its whole job is to protect and preserve what it knows and understands, because that's where it gets its sense of safety. So that's that little Neanderthal part of our brain, the most ancient part, and it's just fear of flight. And anything that happens, the unknown, it perceives as fear. Anything unknown represents danger. And the ego gets its sense of itself through contrast and comparison. And it just doesn't want anything to change. It would rather stay in a situation that doesn't work because it's familiar than to try something new. It's just a process. It's that kind of inchworm process. And the thing that I keep in mind is actually a line from Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. when he says, every day in the pursuit of knowledge, something is added. Every day in the practice of the Tao, something is dropped.
Mm.
And that's the big lesson that I've had to learn.
Mm.
Is that the spiritual journey isn't about adding on more, more knowledge, more this, more. No, we're already perfect, whole, and complete. It's dropping it. So I have a commitment to every day try to leave a little less of me behind, whatever that is. A hardened heart shell, difficult personality, getting along with people, like whatever that is, kind of like the water smooths over and takes the rough edges away, and just letting myself do that as practice, as daily practice, expecting my eyes to open every day, expecting to see more every day. And that more includes where I've been off.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for the spiritual window into a much bigger awareness, right? We find ourselves in these questions of, well, what should I do? And how am I going to handle this? And for many of us, those things haven't even happened yet. And so we're wanting to control something that hasn't even happened in our business yet. And what Reverend Deborah always points me back to is the bigger spiritual significance, right? That we are all walking through together. In terms of just some really tangible tips to leave you guys with, and then Reverend Deborah, I'd love just a few more words from you around just where do we want to leave every single woman leader who's been watching. And I really appreciate your guys' comments. Janie and Lisa and Kia and Anna and Davinia and Bridget are all just thanking you, and they're taking notes. They say tremendous teaching, so many nuggets. Thank you for the insights. In terms of some tangibles for those of you that are building businesses and leading communities, or maybe you have an online group that you're managing, many of us have watched some of our colleagues really get thrown under the bus for how an online community has been managed in the face of this, with these kinds of discussions going on. And so I just want to open up compassion for everybody involved. It's not easy to be the leader of those communities. It's not easy to feel a sense of angst or frustration or volatility and be triggered or having a conversation. In some ways, the internet is a very difficult part to be having these conversations in the first place. I just want to speak a word to let's have compassion for anybody who's trying to express their feelings on a comment thread, right? And so when we can, as leaders, say those kinds of things to our communities, like, look, you guys, this, pick up the phone, like, let's get face to face with each other so that we're not hiding behind, this computer screen, pointing the finger. I think one of the things that we fear as leaders is not doing it right. And I think what Reverend Deborah has spoken to is there's no right or wrong way to do this. I think for me and for the leadership training that I've been involved in and how we lead our clients here at Women Rocking Business, it's more about, like I said, saddling up alongside your clients and finding out what they actually do need and want from you. Like Reverend Deborah said, not every community is the same. Not every child is the same, right? So if it's not your area of expertise, your job is to be more of a listener. You don't have to try to figure out what to say or what to do. You can just love people up and saddle up next to people and not bring some kind of top-down leadership, especially in an area where you're not an expert. I'm certainly not an expert in this area, right? Which is why I reached out to Reverend Deborah last night. And really an invitation to stay in your lane, right? A respectful and with total love, like, stay in your lane. Like, for me, the part of this conversation that matters to my community is how do we lead, and so that was the part of the conversation I wanted to help facilitate. And for you, if you're a health coach, if you're a relationship coach, if you're a spiritual guide of some kind, if you're a healer, look for that place where you can weave what's happening on the planet with what your area of expertise is, like Reverend Deborah said, some of you are masterful at helping people grieve. Well, guess what? You have an opportunity right now. Your work is needed now more than ever, right? And the last thing I want to say is one thing that's really helped us out in our communities, and that I recommend for any of you that have your own online community, is to create a place where people can have the conversations by putting up a particular post. Like, hey, there's angst in the world. We've heard from a lot of you. Let's have that discussion here. Hashtag I'm pissed, right? Hashtag I have something to say. Teach them how to find that post. Teach them how to search for it. Make a little video. Show them where it is. Get to the front side of the conversation, because your online communities have a particular goal. We spend 95% of our time helping women lead and learn business strategies. And when there's a deeper conversation, we may have a place where people can go to dive in. But what that does is it cleans up the rest of the online space we're creating so that we can do the thing that we promised our clients we were going to do, which was teach them to start and launch a successful business. And they have a place to go to connect with each other about a certain topic, but it doesn't take away from what we're trying to do. And so those are just some leadership tips for you, right? Of how you can keep your promise and your leadership and what you deliver and create for your clients and customers. And that you can also compassionately and humbly turn and say, oh, wow, we're going to address this as best we can. I'm figuring this out alongside you. You know, do what I like to say, my friend Annie Pratt says, talk tentatively, because I don't really know what's going on right now. And then, you know, gently get everybody back to the task at hand. So I hope that some of that is important and is useful. I hope some of it's useful and, helpful to you all. And Reverend Deborah, just thank you. What a gift. And what would you leave people with?
My favorite: pain pushes until vision pulls. It's okay to feel the pain, but just know that that's just a needle that's pointing to you for something bigger. Don't get stuck in that. Keep invoking the vision, because that's what's going to carry you over the top.
Pain pushes until a vision pulls.
Mm-hmm.
That I worked with that. I'm still working with that concept. Thank you.
Surely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, every single one of you that's here. We love you. We bless you. Keep your head held high. Know that there's people out there looking for you right now, especially in these circumstances.
Yeah.
Don't be discouraged by what's happening on the planet. Allow it to feed you and catalyze you into being the gift that's needed. Reverend Deborah, I love you.
Love you too. Take care, everybody. Peace and blessings.
One more thing, you guys. You can stay in touch with Reverend Deborah at facebook.com/revdeborah.l.johnson. Just search for Deborah Johnson or Reverend Deborah Johnson on Facebook, or check out her website and stay in touch with her, because she has incredible resources and incredible trainings that she does on topics of social justice, diversity, spiritual inclusion, spiritual awareness, training your consciousness, and more. She's incredible. Check her out. We love you. Thank you for being here. Mwah.